you about, and we may have these images still, we told you about the attack on the US Consulate in Karachi, Pakistan a little earlier, a mob that descended on the US Consulate in Karachi, attacking that consulate, the guardhouse, with stones and sticks and anything else. These are the images at the moment. We've just received some more images, as I say, we're working on to bring them to you, that show the mob inside that guardhouse ransacking the guard. And here we have the new images now. Now, these are important because we've just got word that security forces at the US Consulate have opened fire on this mob. A number of casualties have been reported as those security forces opened fire on those clearly determined to break in to the US Consulate.
And you can see the escalation of everything that's happening, not just now in Iran or the nearest countries. We're going to see people's reaction today, and some of it will be extreme. Elsewhere in the world.
Well, this is it. They say, you know, the reaction of the Arab street or the Islamic world, and certainly Pakistan is considered to be quite a volatile country in terms of protest groups that will take to the streets at the drop of a hat, literally, to come out and certainly to protest against the great Satan, the United States. And they will have been urged to do that by local imams, no doubt. But very serious situation, without a doubt, unfolding at the US Consulate in Karachi, Pakistan. That building being attacked, the main guardhouse there, which will have housed Marine Corps personnel as well as local security guards. We're told now that security forces at the US Consulate have opened fire on that mob. A number of people have been injured, casualties they're being described as.
We've just heard that the US Embassy in Oman has instructed staff, all Americans, to shelter in place due to ongoing activity outside of Muscat. And that's until further notice.
I think this is exactly what we're going to see, Anne, in the hours and days ahead as the mob gets mobilised to go after these US and Western interests. Let's not pretend that the British embassies or other European countries' embassies and consulates around the world are any less at risk. They will be considered by Iran and its supporters as being involved in this war. In fact, the Iranian regime have said overnight and into this morning that they now consider Europe as being at war with Iran as well, because of what we've seen in terms of the defensive posture as articulated by our Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer last night. The fact that RAF Typhoons and tanker aircraft are in the air over the Middle East, combating these missiles that are coming over from Iran. According to Sir Keir Starmer, it's aimed at protecting our allies and protecting, of course, British interests and civilians in that region.
And I suppose Keir Starmer and everybody else is going to have to think at what point does defence become involvement, and how legal is this war at all? Many questions being asked about that.
Well, that's, it's classic Keir Starmer, isn't it? He's dancing on the head of a pin here. But at the end of the day, the Iranian government doesn't draw that distinction.
No,
they just see that the UK is involved. The UK combat jets are up. They are targeting missiles that the Iranians are firing over. De facto, as far as the Iranians are concerned, you're in the fight.
Let's then get the thoughts of barrister and international lawyer Natasha Hausdorff. Natasha, a very good morning to you. Thank you for waiting. I know you have been for a while. A lot of questions are being raised, both at home in Washington for President Trump, but elsewhere, and may well come up again tomorrow when the EU meets on this, about the legality of this war at all.
Indeed, and we've heard a great many protestations, including from politicians in the United Kingdom. Not all of them, it's important to state, have very much of a background in international law, declaring this to be illegal. Certainly, as far as my analysis is concerned, that is simply not the case. Israel's position has been stated very clearly for some time. It was iterated also in the strikes that we saw in June of last year. And it is that Israel has been in an ongoing armed conflict with Iran for decades. That has manifested itself through Iranian proxies targeting Israel, Hamas and Hezbollah included. But there have also, of course, been direct strikes by Iran onto Israeli sovereign territory. And in the context of the US support for its ally Israel in what is therefore lawful armed action in this ongoing armed conflict. These protestations that this is a violation of the prohibition on the use of force simply can't hold water. This is self-defense in a very concrete, essential manner that is protected, that is recognized by the UN Charter under Article 51, but it's not bestowed on anyone. This is seen, as I say, as an inherent right. And the US has bolstered that ongoing existing legal justification with President Trump's speech incorporating aspects of preemptive self-defense against an imminent threat posed by the Iranian nuclear program being re-established. So there are multiple layers of legal justification here. And those that suggest that this is a violation of international law and seek to dismiss it out of hand seem to me, for the most part, to have some sort of political motivation to make those comments. The really significant impact of this on international law as a whole cannot be ignored, because when people misrepresent international law in this fashion, it becomes confused, it becomes used and weaponized for political purposes. And I think that really has an impact on the credibility of the international legal order as a whole.
Natasha, is there a potential issue, though, in that clearly it has gone beyond just an effort to ensure that Iran does not have the capability to build a nuclear weapon, does not have the capability to deliver that nuclear weapon, but you have the US president standing up, along with, of course, his Israeli allies, and urging the people of Iran to now rise up to overthrow the regime. It's about regime change as much as it's about the effort to try to stop the nuclear program.
Well, we need to be very clear about what the president said at the opening of what he called major combat operations. And the justification that he set out was squarely the Iranian nuclear program, its ballistic missile threat, and the long history of Iranian attacks since the revolution on US interests, starting with the hostage-taking in 1979. What Trump then went on to talk about, in terms of this being an opportunity for the Iranian people to throw off the oppressive Islamic regime there, is a corollary. It was not cited as the motivation for these attacks, and that's a very significant distinction to bear in mind. Of course, it should be being celebrated, not just by the Iranian people, not just by those freedom-loving people in the region and Americans, but I'm bound to say also by the UN Secretary General, as action that America and Israel ought to be thanked for because of those potential consequences of ridding the world of the Islamic regime, the foremost state sponsor of terror. But in terms of the legal justifications, those were set out very clearly as being in relation to the threats posed by the Iranian Islamic regime and, of course, the ongoing armed conflict that already exists. And once you are in an ongoing armed conflict, there isn't this sort of limit that you've suggested on the measures that one can take, so long as action falls within the rules, the laws of armed conflict, so that military targets are those that strikes are being directed against, so that proportionality is exercised in relation to those strikes, so that distinction is maintained between civilians and combatants on the ground, and that precautions are taken to prevent civilian casualties. And these are the standard rules by which both the IDF, the Israeli army, and the US armed forces operate by. There's no suggestion that they've been abandoned in this case. So long as those rules are complied with, then this action has to be considered lawful. The constraints that you've suggested that wouldn't make sense, quite frankly, in international law, if you are able to exercise self-defense to a certain extent, but not to go the full way to target all of the military objectives that you have in mind, or all of the elements that pose a threat to you. International law is very clear about facilitating the sort of armed conflict that we have seen over the last day and a bit.
It's fascinating what you said a couple of minutes ago about the fact that more and more we see the whole concept of international law being weaponized by certain people. I mean, we've almost become used to it, haven't we?
We have, and I think the reason that malign actors here are able to get away with misrepresenting international law, and I'm sorry to say that many have done so in the course of your coverage, which has generally, I'm bound to say, been excellent. So many congratulations on that. But of course, you're presenting balanced perspectives and incorporating different views, and you've had commentator after commentator come on and make this declaration that this is unlawful without any proper explanation or justification. And that has yet, I think, to be properly and squarely challenged. And I would like to see more people and more experts in international law and military experts calling out the disinformation that is being propagated by some of these actors, including in the United Kingdom. The reason that they're able to get away with it, I think, is because, general levels of literacy on international law are not particularly high. And when ordinary people hear these very assured statements being made about international law, it's understandable that they would take them as read. But this is a process we have seen over many decades.
Yes, it's very easy to weaponize it and shut down any other argument, isn't it? Natasha, we've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. You've got some breaking news, Mark?
Yeah, more on the situation in Oman. You were breaking just a little earlier on that the US Embassy in Oman had instructed staff to shelter in place because of ongoing activity outside of Muscat. Well, we are now getting reports of Iranian drone strikes on Oman's Duqm port, commercial port, targeted by 2 drones, that according to the state news agency in Oman. And further to that, 1 expat worker was wounded in the targeting of the port. So that of concern. And again, it just highlights, in Bahrain, in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, there are so many expats that are out there. Many Brits, many expats from all around the world who are out there and working. Lovely part of the world to work in, good salaries attract people out there, but there are potential dangers.
It's a commercial port rather than a military one.
Yeah, but, we got the situation in Oman again where it's one of these states in that region around the Gulf that are, friendly towards the United States, that provide facilities for the US military on their soil. And that's what Iran says it's doing. That's why it's sent barrages, they say, of missiles into the likes of Dubai and, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, Iraq, and, 14 locations, according to the Iranians, have been targeted that they say host US military facilities